The forest of Blackthorn had never looked so still. Tall pines stood like silent guards on either side of the clearing where the two packs had gathered, their leaders facing one another across a stretch of trampled grass. It was supposed to be a simple meeting, a chance for old enemies to speak instead of fight. Nobody expected it to end in blood. Wren Ashby stood near the back of the crowd, half hidden behind a line of taller warriors. She was not important enough to stand at the front. She was not important enough for most things in Blackthorn Pack. She worked in the healing tents, cleaning wounds and mixing herbs, and most days, nobody remembered her name unless they needed bandages. At the front of the gathering stood Alpha King Cale Blackthorn. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had never once doubted his own strength. His dark eyes moved across the rival pack's delegation with careful attention, searching for any sign of betrayal hidden beneath their calm faces. Wren had seen him many times from a distance. She had bandaged his soldiers after training accidents. She had once handed him a cup of water during a long council meeting, and he had said thank you without even looking at her. That was the extent of their acquaintance. A king and a healer's assistant did not cross paths in any meaningful way. That was simply how the pack worked. The negotiations that day were meant to end years of tension between Blackthorn and the neighboring Frostmane pack. Old wounds ran deep between the two territories, but Cale had insisted on trying for peace. He believed that his people deserved a future without constant fear of war. Not everyone agreed with him. Some of his own council thought he was being foolish, trusting wolves who had once tried to take Blackthorn land by force. As the two leaders exchanged formal words, Wren noticed something strange. A slight movement in the trees behind the Frostmane delegation, a glint of metal catching the afternoon light. She was not a warrior, she was not trained to notice threats, but something about the flash made her stomach twist with fear. She looked closer and saw it clearly this time, a bow, drawn tight, aimed directly at the Alpha King's chest. There was no time to shout a warning. No time to think about rank, or duty, or the fact that she had no right to move so close to the king without permission. Her body acted before her mind could catch up. She pushed through the crowd, shoving past startled warriors, and threw herself forward just as the arrow was released. The pain that followed was unlike anything she had ever felt. A sharp, burning force struck her side, and the world tilted sideways. She heard shouting, screaming, the sound of swords being drawn all at once, but it all sounded far away, muffled, as though she were hearing it through water. She fell to the ground, and the last thing she saw clearly was Cale's face above her, his eyes wide with something she could not name. Shock, maybe, or fear. It was strange to see fear on the face of a king who was supposed to be fearless. Then everything went dark. When Wren opened her eyes again, she was lying in a bed she did not recognize. The room was warm, lit by soft firelight, and smelled faintly of healing herbs. For a moment she thought she was back in the healing tents, but the bed was too soft, the blankets too fine. This was not a place meant for someone like her. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain flared through her side, sharp and insistent, and she gasped, sinking back into the pillows. "Don't move," said a voice from nearby. "You'll open the wound again." She turned her head and found Cale sitting in a chair beside the bed. He looked tired, his dark hair messy, his shirt still stained faintly with blood that was not his own. He had not left. She realized that with a strange jolt of surprise. He was still here. "My king," she said weakly, trying to push herself into a more respectful position despite the pain. "I am sorry. I should not have." "Stop." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "Do not apologize to me." Wren blinked in confusion. In Blackthorn Pack, acting without permission was forbidden, especially when it involved the king's safety. Guards were trained for that purpose. Ordinary pack members were expected to stay back, to trust that trained warriors would handle any danger. She had broken that rule completely. She had thrown herself in front of an arrow meant for him, without a single thought for what punishment might follow. "I interfered," she whispered. "I know that is against protocol. I only reacted. I did not think." Cale leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, studying her with an intensity that made her feel as though he could see straight through her skin. "You saved my life," he said simply. "There is no protocol that punishes that." She did not know how to respond, so she said nothing at all. Over the following days, Ren remained in the private chambers near the king's own quarters, tended by the pack's best healer instead of the assistants she used to work alongside. She protested at first, insisting she did not deserve such treatment, that she should be moved back to the healing tents where she belonged. But nobody listened to her objections. The healer only smiled gently and told her to rest. Kale visited every single day. Sometimes he sat quietly while she slept, and she would wake to find him staring at the fire, lost in thought. Other times he asked her questions about herself, small things she never expected a king to care about: where she had grown up, why she had chosen to become a healer instead of a warrior, what her favorite season was. At first she assumed it was guilt driving his visits, a king checking on someone who had been injured protecting him, out of obligation rather than genuine interest. But as the days passed, she began to notice small things that guilt alone could not explain. The way his shoulders relaxed slightly whenever he entered her room, the way he sometimes forgot to maintain his usual composed expression and simply looked relieved to see her awake and breathing. "Why did you do it?" he asked one evening, when the fire had burned low and the room was quiet. "You could have died. You almost did die." Ren considered the question carefully before answering. "I saw the arrow, and I knew there was no time to warn you. I did not think about what would happen to me. I only thought that Blackthorn needed you. The pack needs you. And you?" Kale asked, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "Did you think about what you needed?" She looked away, embarrassed by the question. "I am not important enough for that kind of thinking, my king." Something in his expression shifted, sharp and unhappy. "Do not say that again." She glanced back at him, surprised by the intensity in his tone. He looked almost angry, though she sensed the anger was not directed at her. "Every wolf in this pack matters," he continued. "I have failed if any of you believe otherwise. Especially you." Ren did not understand what he meant by that last part, and she was too tired and too sore to ask him to explain. She simply nodded and let her eyes drift closed, comforted by his presence, even though she could not name why. 2 weeks passed before she was strong enough to walk without assistance. During that time, word had spread through the pack about what happened at the negotiation clearing. Some whispered that the healer's assistant had acted foolishly, risking her own life in a moment better left to trained guards. Others whispered something different, something that made Ren's cheeks burn whenever she overheard it. They whispered that the king visited her chambers every single day, longer than necessary for a simple recovery, and that his eyes followed her whenever she was near. Ren dismissed these rumors as nothing more than gossip. A king did not fall for a healer's assistant. Such things happened in old stories, not in real life, not in a pack ruled by strict hierarchy and ancient tradition. She told herself this firmly, again and again, trying to keep her heart from hoping for something that could never be real. On the day she was finally strong enough to attend a pack gathering, Kale requested that she be present. She assumed it was simply a formality, perhaps a small acknowledgement for her bravery, before the matter was closed and forgotten. She dressed carefully, still favoring her healing side, and made her way to the great hall where the entire pack had assembled. The hall was full, warriors and healers and elders standing shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the king to speak. Ren found a place near the back, as she always did, trying to make herself as small and unnoticed as possible, despite the curious glances thrown her way. Kale stood at the front of the hall, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. When his eyes found hers across the crowded room, he did something that made her breath catch. He walked directly toward her, ignoring the surprised murmurs that followed his movement, until he stood right in front of her. "Ren Ashby," he said, his voice carrying easily through the silent hall. "Step forward." Her legs felt unsteady as she obeyed, moving to stand where the entire pack could see her clearly. She had no idea what was happening, and the uncertainty made her heart pound painfully against her ribs. Kale turned to address the gathered crowd, though his eyes kept returning to her face. "3 weeks ago, this woman threw herself in front of an arrow meant to end my life. She held no rank that required such sacrifice. She had no duty that demanded it. She acted purely from her own heart, without hesitation, without thought for herself." The hall was utterly silent, every eye fixed on the scene unfolding before them. "Many of you know our laws," Kale continued. You know that a mate is chosen by fate, confirmed through a bond that cannot be forced or faked. I have waited many years for that bond to reveal itself to me, and it never has. I believed, for a long time, that perhaps I was destined to rule alone. He paused, and Ren felt her pulse quicken, unsure of where his words were leading. But I have come to understand something these past weeks, he said, turning fully to face her now. A bond is not only proven through fate's pull, it is proven through sacrifice. Through the instinct to protect, even at the cost of one's own life. Ren did not know me well. She owed me nothing beyond simple loyalty to her pack. And yet, in the space of a single heartbeat, she chose to save me without any thought of reward. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, too stunned to do anything else. My next command, Kale announced, his voice steady and clear enough for every wolf in the hall to hear, is this. Ren Ashby will no longer serve as a healer's assistant. She will be elevated, effective immediately, to Luna-in-Waiting of Blackthorn Pack. She will stand beside me as my chosen mate and future queen. The silence that followed was absolute. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Such an elevation had never happened outside the traditional bonding ceremony, and certainly never for someone considered so far beneath royal status. Ren herself stood frozen, certain she had misheard him, certain this could not possibly be real. My king, she whispered, so quietly that only he could hear her. I do not understand. I am no one. I have no training for such a position, no name that carries weight in this pack. Kale's expression softened, and for a moment, the powerful Alpha King disappeared, replaced by someone gentler, someone simply grateful to be alive because of her. You are the one who chose to save me, when it would have been far easier to save yourself, he said. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of Luna you will become. Slowly, one by one, the wolves throughout the hall began to kneel. First the elders, who understood better than anyone the weight of true sacrifice. Then the warriors, who respected courage above all else. Then the healers, Ren's own people, who had always known her gentle heart even when the rest of the pack overlooked her. Ren felt tears gather in her eyes as she watched the entire hall bow before her, a gesture she never once imagined she would receive in her lifetime. She looked up at Kale, searching his face for any hint of doubt, any sign that this decision was made in haste and might be regretted later. She found none, only certainty, warm and steady, matching the quiet certainty growing in her own chest. I did not act that day to become a queen, she said softly, for his ears alone. I acted because I could not imagine a world where you were gone, and I could have stopped it. I know, Kale replied, lifting her hand gently to his lips. That is exactly why I chose you. Outside the great hall, the forest of Blackthorn stood as still and silent as it had on the day of the attack, but something had changed completely within its borders. A healer's assistant who had once gone unnoticed now stood beside her king, chosen not by the ancient pull of fate, but by something the pack had learned to value just as deeply, courage freely given, love proven through action rather than words. The arrow that had been meant to end a king's reign had instead, quietly and unexpectedly, begun a queen's.